Hello there, it is Toby here from TIJ Music. Welcome to an album review. Today we are going to look, for the first time on this channel, at the Moody Blues. And today we're going to review their 1970 album, A Question of Balance. This is their sixth album. And my relationship with the Moody Blues started maybe about 6 months ago, where I went to get some records. I went to buy some records. I'm a record collector myself. And I saw a job lot of records on Facebook. There was 120 for £30, and in with that job lot, without boring anybody too much, was the Moody Blues album, On the Threshold of a Dream. Now, for some reason or other, I'm aware that somebody I work with is quite a big fan of the Moody Blues. So I said, what do you think of the album? And he said it's very good, and that all of the first seven, which are kind of termed the big seven, he really likes. So where I'm at with the Moody Blues at the moment is kind of a 50% strike rate. I've listened to 6 of them. The only one I haven't listened to I picked up on vinyl the other week, which is the last one, 7th Sojourn. I haven't quite got round to listening to that yet, but the other 6 I've listened to. And I've got a 50% strike rate, so I'll explain. The first 2 of those, Days of Future Past, In Search of the Lost Chord, not great. This album, On the Threshold of a Dream, Every Good Boy Deserves Favour, really enjoy. And then To Our Children's Children, not so keen on that. So 50% strike rate when it comes to the Moody Blues at the moment. And the reason that I'm reviewing this album is this was the last of the 3 that I listened to. I kind of went round it in a strange order. I listened to, obviously, the album that I got in with the job lot first, On the Threshold of a Dream. I then went and bought another record job lot, a completely separate one, and got Every Good Boy Deserves Favour. Listened to that a lot, and then finally I got this in a job lot of 4 Moody Blues records, which was this one here, the best of, and then 2 of the 80s albums. Now, the 80s albums wasn't fond of at all, but I think that's quite well documented, that the 80s albums are a drop-off in quality after Lost Long Distance Voyager, and those, if anybody's interested, were The Other Side of Life and Sur La Mer. It just wasn't interested, it just didn't do it for me, but I enjoy this album, and we're going to have a little chat about it today. So this was the 6th album, released in June 1970, and it was very much an attempt to strip down that psychedelic sound that could better perform the songs in concert. And this album did very well. Went to number 1 in the UK and went to number 3 in the States. And this is really nice artwork. I really like the artwork for this album. It's really eye-catching. Where you could argue maybe for the 2 albums previous, it wasn't as good. The track listing on this album, just a single album, no double albums going on here. On side 1 we've got Question, How Is It We Are Here? And The Tide Rushes In, Don't You Feel Small, and Tortoise in the Hair. 5 tracks on each side. And then opening up side 2, you've got It's Up To You, followed by The Minstrel Song, Dawning Is the Day, Melancholy Man, and finally, The Balance. So let's talk about it. First track, Question, Justin Hayward pen track. And it's technically one half of the title track. This track was originally going to be called Question of Balance, but was just called Question. And it really starts with quite a bombast, doesn't it? It goes to that slower, more love song beat, though, after that. And as much as I love my hard rock music, Motorhead's Judas Priest of this world, I'm a sucker for the slow tracks, the ballads and all that schmaltz. And it's really a beautiful ballad. It talks about the anti-war stance at Vietnam at the time. And at the time of recording, it's of course very apparent with the situation in Ukraine at the moment. And I can also see the links in this track to youth and all the frustrations of youth that come along with that as well, and ultimately it's all about how you interpret these things. But a really good start to the album. I had heard Question before. The only 2 tracks I'd heard before I started listening to the Moody Blues albums was Nights in White Satin, which I think every man and his dog knows, and Question, and I don't really know how I came across it, but it's a great track, and yeah, it was really good. The first time I listened to this album, obviously I'd heard Question before, and then I listened to the rest of it. I listened to the record first while I was working. Then, about a week later, I had a second go while I was out on a walk. And I thought, a bit of a slow burner this is. And it took me a bit of a while to get into it. And I have that with albums where sometimes it just clicks straight away. You think, wow, I like this. And then sometimes you think, it ain't great. And sometimes, unfortunately, I never go back to it. But with this, I thought, no, I'm going to give it another try. And in fairness, it's a consistent album. I think it is. Track 2, How Is It We Are Here? Probably my least favourite on side 1. After saying it's a consistent album, probably my least favourite on side 1. The noodling in the middle is the exception. I really like that. But yeah, it's a good track. It's a good album track, but it's probably got more of a 60s feel, I would say, rather than the early 70s. Obviously, this is only just going into the 70s. But I'll probably give that a 7 out of 10. I do a rating out of 10 on these reviews, by the way, to then get to an overall rating at the end. And my rating for the first track question is a 9 out of 10. Really, really like that track. So track 3, And the Tide Rushes In. Now, remember what I said about the slower schmaltz and all that stuff on track 1? It's not schmaltz this, but I think you can guess what I'm going to say. I think this is a bit of a progressive masterpiece. The vocal here is none other than just beautiful, really. Is the word that you can describe that with perfectly. Ray Thomas vocal here. 3 different vocalists for the first 3 tracks. You've got Justin Hayward on the first, you've got Mike Pinder on the second, and then Ray Thomas on the third. And although Hayward's vocals are probably my favourite, really like Ray Thomas's vocals here. It's just beautiful. It's a little bit different to anything else that's on the album, but it really stands out. It kind of just flows along without doing anything that's too drastic. A little bit like Question, a little bit dissimilar, to Question, in that Question has that bombast, then slows down, and then comes back into it again. This is more of just a smooth, progressive journey. It's almost like a love song, and it's brilliant. I really enjoy it, so this, again, is another 9 out of 10. So, the 4th track, after the first 3 tracks were individually from them on the vocals, they all come together on this one. Don't You Feel Small? There's there. Put my teeth back in. Even a whisper from Graham Edge on this one. Don't You Feel Small is the 4th track. This one probably lacks in its lyrics, but what it does lack, it certainly makes for in the musical sense. Highlights particularly being the flute and the guitar in that midsection. And in comparison to my hard rock roots, I think that really the music of the Moody Blues adds some nice instruments to my repertoire. Flute, you wouldn't expect that in bands like Priest, Motorhead and that. Of course, you're going to comment Ian Anderson with Jethro Tull. Yes, I know that, but it really sounds great, this. But it's not my favourite on the album, but it's a good track, a little bit better than How Is It We Are Here, made up, as I said, by the musical instrumentation of it. So I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. And that rating also goes for the last track on side 1, Tortoise and the Hare. I almost feel like I shouldn't like this one, because it just feels a bit too basic. But it's catchy. In a strange way, it was the track that was on heavy rotation most when I first heard the album. And the guitar licks here are a killer, really, from Justin Hayward. I understand when some people say, not too sure about the album. I don't know whether I'm more of a lyrics or a music guy. I think you can possibly say you can't have one without the other. But maybe music's a bit more important, and I think that the musical side here definitely outweighs the lyrics on the album in general. And I think that the music is really what saves this track, because the lyrics are a little bit bland on this one, a little bit bland on the previous track, but the music, the guitar in particular, really saves it. So I'm going to give this one another 8 out of 10. Then we sideload to side 2. Start of side 2 with If It's Up To You. Hadn't heard this one, obviously, before I played the album, and when I turned the record over, as you do, I thought, oh, this is nice, this sounds good. And to describe it in a nutshell, it's just a feel-good track. You go back to Justin Hayward, of course, for this one, on the vocal, written by Justin Hayward. And the vocals are sweet, the guitars, everything just flows here. It's just a good track, it all works. And I guess it gets you tapping your feet and feeling good. Maybe not in the way you would when you're listening to AC/DC, but in a different type of way. But it's really good stuff. And I feel like in the Moody's, Hayward's vocals are certainly the most accessible. And this almost feels like a pop track, but a really good one at that. That's not an insult to it. And again, the like that could have been a really good single, but wasn't. And again, I think this is a real highlight in the album. Another 9 out of 10. Track 7, Minstrel Song. It's going to be a 7 out of 10. Not the best on the album. It's got a catchy chorus. It's almost got 60s Beatles type influences. I almost say that as a bit of a, not an insult, but a negative. I guess I do forget sometimes that this was released just in 1970. Most of the music I listen to and most of my favourite albums are from that later 70s period. So maybe some of these sounds, some of these influences, I'm not as accustomed to as in some of the other 70s tracks, but it's another feel-good song without being overly explicit. It's a little bit like the tortoise and the hare situation. You almost shouldn't like it, but it's good. But I think what limits it is that it's almost a good album track at best, really. I don't think it's any more than that. Then we head to track 8, and this, for me, begins the best segment of the album towards the end. And track number 8 is Dawning is the Day. I'll possibly give some of the other tracks injustice and might be unfair to them, but I think that Hayward's tracks just click with me. Don't know why, but I think that the vocal, particularly the guitar licks, obviously the guitar licks are, I'd say on other tracks as well, but particularly the vocal, it just clicks. There's mandolin here as well, which is really nice, I think. Again, I'm not a music student, I'm just here for the sounds and the music. Just a real nice, almost slow one. Again, a little bit like Tide Rushes In, just carries on. And that's maybe when I first listened to the album, gave the impression it was a bit of a slow burner. Those two in particular, Minstrel Song you could say as well, it just bumbles along, but that's the beauty of it when you get to love this stuff. And I think it's really good, really, really good. So 8 out of 10 for that. Track 9, best on the album, possibly the best Moody Blues song, period. And that's Melancholy Man. And as a grumpy git, I think this song sums me up perfectly. But again, it's just that beautiful lush arrangement, particularly the chorus. The desperation and some of the heartbreak you've got here. It just makes me visualise a falling feeling almost. And, the numbness, all of those emotions portrayed here. And the synth sections in particular are just absolute killer. Real highlight this. And it's followed on the next album, Every Good Boy Deserves Favour, which I'll be doing a review of soon, by My Song. And it's just beautiful. It really is. It's fantastic. And I'm rubber stamping this at a 10. I really like it. Final track of the album is The Balance, which is a poem from Graham Edge. I think I'm saying that... right in saying Ray Thomas does the voiceover for this, not Graham. Should say the recently departed Graham Edge, unfortunately. But the poem from Graham Edge again is beautiful, and my first encounter with the Moody's was on the Threshold of the Dream. And of course you have Graham's poem that starts that in the beginning, or from the beginning. I think it's in the beginning. From the beginning? I don't know. But that's a little bit weirder because it's almost like bloody Doctor Who. You think, what the hell's going on here? When I first put the album on, I thought, this isn't Nights in White Satin. Nothing like it. But this one is brilliant. I almost feel like the last section of this, maybe it's intended, maybe it's not. It's almost like a mini concept album. The self-awareness. He thought of those he hurt and those sort of lyrics. It's almost like a follow-on to the previous track. It's like going back to year 11 English, this, isn't it? But anyway, that's the second half of the title track. That one I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. And you can see by none of these tracks here being below 7 that I really do rate this as a consistent album. It's a good listen throughout. There's nothing you want to skip. As I said, maybe probably side 2 is better than side 1. It's consistent. Everything is good or above. But there are a couple of tracks I feel that maybe I've been a little bit generous to. Could be considered average. How Is It We Are Here? Minstrel Song. Not the best on the album, but it's really bolstered by Melancholy Man, Question, and The Tide Rushes In. Some real solid Moody Blues tracks. So with those 10 tracks, you get to a verdict, which comes up at 8.3 out of 10, which I think sounds about right, actually. It comes up as effectively a solid 4-star album. And as I said, when I listened to it first, it seemed a bit of a slow burner, except for a few tracks. And I guess you could say that's the case, possibly. But when I got into it, I really started to admire some of those tracks that you could possibly consider slow burners at the start. And it's a real solid album, but the album tracks are good. It's not a specific weak point, but as I said, some of those tracks do lack a little bit. But equally, there's some real highlights on this album. So go out and listen to A Question of Balance if you haven't done already. I do enjoy it, if not for anything more than the first track. I think the first track's a real highlight, and the tide rushes in. Melancholy Man, and It's Up to You, the real highlights on this album, I think. But I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed listening to A Question of Balance, listened to a lot of the Moody Blues over the last couple of months, and hopefully I can get into those other albums. Maybe not, but that's been it for me today. I think that's it. I think that covers it. But yeah, a good album, a good solid album from the Moody Blues. Is it as good as the other two I've listened to? Possibly, possibly not. But you'll find out in the other reviews that follow this. But if you've enjoyed this review, please, I don't know. Please leave a like down below. Comment your thoughts as well. Are you a Moody's fan? Have you ever listened to the Moody's before? Let me know down in the comments. And also make sure to subscribe for regular album reviews, top 10s, unboxings, everything relating to music. I've been Toby from TIJ Music. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.